There we go. Okay, so if we try to summarize what you guys missed, right, is we began the Friday evening. We began looking into the whole idea of the promise of the land and how connected, right, from the beginning. Our becoming a nation is connected to the land of Israel, as is promised to Abraham. And we saw that promise. We asked ourselves whether it's something which is conditional or non-conditional, whether it's dependent on the actions that we take, or and we also saw later that it doesn't matter what we do, we're going to be kicked out of the land at a certain point, right? We saw that in Dvarim, that was already, that Moshe Rabbeinu says that to the people. And we talked a lot about the connection, how the also the natural wonders of the land, whether they're connected to us as a people or whether they are just natural as well. And that was like the first section. Anyone want to add anything very short from like the first one? Did I do okay? Okay, thank you. I have a thumbs up from everyone here. Okay, then when we continued the learning, we started talking about the relationship between diaspora and what does it mean to go into exile. We saw the psukim first in the Chumash, and then from there to the prophets. What is the idea of exile? And also the surprising element that one should be happy in exile, that you should plant trees, that you should have babies, right? That you should basically pray for the country and be loyal to the country that you are in. And we asked ourselves, okay, well, what does it mean to leave exile? When do we leave the exile? What does it mean to be in exile? We had discussions here also about what does that mean today for us. In other words, we're physically not there, and we talked a lot over the Shabbat. We had a panel discussion as well on what is the relationship between Israel and the diaspora today in relation to October 7th and changes and transformations that are ongoing. And I think we were left with a lot of open questions, but also a sense that, okay, well, we have something to do in the diaspora. There's something very important. And also hearing from everyone here, how everyone feels really a representative of the Jewish people, whether they want it or not. And we saw that the prophets also, Jeremiah speaks about it, and Yechezkel, right, talk about the idea that you shall be that Hashem will take you back to the land once you have been a light upon a light for the nations, so that that representation is bringing a fixing to the world, and that standing up for the ethics and morals of Am Yisrael are connected to that. What we will now take all of that, and the danger of where we left off last night is saying it's okay. Well, I'm okay. I live in Finland, I live in Norway, and live in Denmark, Sweden, California, right? Wherever I am, and we're okay. Well, we create our spiritual center. The Reform movement, why do they call the Bet Knesset? They changed the name to call it a temple, because in the original Reform movement, when it was set actually in Germany, not right in the United States, they said, well, the whole idea of a temple is just spiritual. So we will replace it and we will bring the ethics and morals to the society that we are in. And that's enough. We don't have this issue of going back to Zion. And I think that's changed over time. And I think even today, there's for sure there's a transformation in terms of how existential the threat is and how important Israel is wherever we are. We can't just detach ourselves, whatever political. And many Jews, I think something common is that many Jews feel quite alone, right? And that you need that connection both to Am Yisrael throughout the world, and that also. One last thing, just to sum up, is that we also talked about, came up in the panel discussion, what is our relation to others when we're under threat, and how do we deal with that in nuanced ways so we don't fall. Someone used the word, the YouTube trap, that we fall into, that we follow ourselves, just the algorithms of one narrative, and then it makes us feel much more threatened maybe than we should be, but we also heard very personal stories about the actual threats that people are feeling. So if I just made any sense to you, you realize that you missed a great Shabbat, and that you should have been here with us. But here we are, and we're going to continue now. Nice to see you all online. And we're going to split into Chevruta for half an hour, which means that those online open up the part number 3, and I'm going to split you into breakout rooms. I've never done this before, so I'm going to try it. How many do we have here? We have 15. So if we make um, okay. Okay, well, everyone here you can split into groups as we did over Shabbat, 3 people, 2, 3, 4 people. And I'm going to split you now into the rooms. And anyone who doesn't have the sheet, let me know via chat. And I see one. I will send it right now.
That's how we learn it in fruits and we learn first. Once you tell me yeah, so to me, right, this I don't know. It's hard to it's like yeah, must be to be I guess we go is it like a topic and then we have discussed topics first. And what is it about no, it's exploration of it. I believe this way I was before looking up that's one of the other. People does this volunteer in Congo. This is and feel like there's a lot of everybody down testifying. Well, the only news where you have to go on about well, the first one says that it's trying to be people around you. Well, but the other so what I'm seeing here is like those science to me. So that is like they will feel have the same spot on the level. It's all contradict. Basically, what they're saying, people discussing. Yeah, and this is like for I think actually support that. But also, and if we have to agree, but it's for us. Maybe we have to go through this. EU studies the Torah was around Jews and kills and says no. That is also a big
we were kicked out, into Babylonia, we were kicked out by Babylonia.
like the biggest difference is those things. I think
ever as
so it depends on
like as a
one
living in
says
this
that
world to try
as long as you live in
to
Israel,
holy a life as we
even if
can,
everything around you is
as
chaos,
harmonious as we can.
none of us is it doesn't matter. It's afterward.
It's also you are not very little more elaborate. we kind of said,
Yeah.
either more of a medical or like that's how I. There's something special in there, but you maybe living a life not there. Also, it's an excess thing, and then it also brings me like
Ever a time where work and you also want to back a bit of a lot of the fact that relationship and what's always been there. So this situation of Israel with the Babylonians has been the thing over thousands of years. That's the same thing living in the diaspora, but in a very uncertain way. Yeah, there's also been the thing that both things have been going on. Yeah. Yeah. So it is about bringing hope is but you different the land where you are at the same point. No one everything is just chaos. Everybody goes easy. I don't know. We are sacrificed a bit earlier. Anyway, they are treated as human beings and they don't inherit right. I know that I don't live the land. That one basically you were so deeply really bad. I know everything goes on.
Yeah.
And the same thing with I don't wish it was it's like
Yeah, you're right. I think, history, that's just Wales.
Okay, everyone here is welcome back. And we were just hearing from the room over here. Yeah. Okay, that's pretty good. Um, okay, so basically, right, the sources that we touched upon are very, very deep. And we see contradictions between them, even in the first source, that doesn't make sense. How can you on the one hand say one thing and say the exact opposite? What is the to live in Israel? Doesn't matter. It could be a desolate land with no spirituality is the best thing, and just don't ever leave. Or suddenly we have something on the opposite, even saying that Zion can now be replaced and moved somewhere else, right? And that Ashkenaz and Sfarad can become Zion, right? And I think just to sum up what would be to say that we never give up on our spiritual growth wherever we are. And therefore, to say one day we will go back to Jerusalem and we will, but in the meantime, we can just live our regular lives without any spirituality in the diaspora and be okay with that. That's none of these sources would support that. In other words, we have to all the time strive wherever we are to live a good life. And a good life means spiritual and also physical. And we saw that yesterday. Plant trees, have children, right? And also the acceptance of the fact that this was something that was determined by, right, by Hashem from the beginning, that we would be sent out from the land. One of the questions is also, is the land okay without us? Right? Yesterday we asked the opposite, right? But is the land okay without us? And we mentioned, I think, on Friday, the famous journal of Mark Twain, who comes to the land and sees a desolate land, and he said, "How is this the blessed land? I no longer believe that this is what was promised. How could this be the promised land? It's a land full of thorns and desert and emptiness." And you see the blessedness of the land. And someone yesterday mentioned about the innovation. How could Israel go through so much trauma from 1948 for 76 years, never having a moment of rest, and have so much development and innovation, and all of the time never accepting to be in a sad state? And we have a good enough reason also today to just say things are so bad. What can I do? That's not what we do. We are always a people of growth, of spiritual growth, of innovation. Um, we don't have time to go through the sources themselves. I just wanted to mention that the second source here that you see from the Cairo Geniza, if anyone is unaware of the Cairo Geniza, it's something very interesting to look up. What the Geniza is, a place where you put all the holy, anything that you're not allowed to throw away, anything which is sacred, anything holy. So if you have a prayer book, if you have a Torah scroll, if you have anything with Hashem's name, then anything written in Torah, then it is put aside. In the case of Cairo, it was put in the attic of a synagogue there and then discovered. So that you have a collection there of hundreds of years of history, of unknown history that was suddenly found and preserved because it's in Egypt. So it's fascinating. Tens of thousands of documents. And then you see the relationship between the heads and the leaders of the diaspora, for example, to the Jewish world in the 7th century, in the 8th century, in the 9th century, which is fantastic. So the Cairo Geniza is a very important source. Rabbi Sadia Gaon was in the 10th century, and it's very interesting to see he's a how he sees this issue of the diaspora. But as we said at the beginning of the shiur, once we get into the sources themselves, we see that the Ramban, not surprisingly, after we saw on Friday how strong he was that you can't keep mitzvot properly outside of the land, you see how he's saying just stepping into the land is a positive commandment, and it is the place to be. And it is actually, it's not being there is giving up on a promise. Eretz Yisrael is about a land of love, and it's right to just to say, well, I can manage elsewhere. He sees as very problematic. He himself moved from Andalusia, from Spain to Eretz Yisrael, and that comes through in the sources that he brings forth, which are very strong. And we saw just going very quickly through the sources, you see that the Talmud in Tuvot mentions that living outside of the land is as if one has no God. Which is also a very powerful statement. I wanted to ask, we had a discussion here in this group. Daniel, maybe you want to, we talked about the place of the synagogue in this. Maybe you want to, if you speak loud, I think they can hear you also. Can you hear us over there? Okay, yeah. Speak loud.
The context of the first text, Zion flee to where the daughter of Babylon dwells. To me, it was that Zion is Israel, the nation. And when the nation moves, Jews moves to another place, then Israel moves with the nation, with the group. And let's say we are here now in Helsinki, and we have prayers in the synagogue. Then, in a way, I would say we have a community of Israel here, and that we can work it out in that way for a period of time until it's time later to go back to the Holy Land. And so we can make different communities of Israel wherever we go, and we can make a minyan. That was my interpretation.
So, yeah, thank you. I think, anyone want to comment on that?
I agree.
So we see this constant tension, I would say, between the fact that the sources are being very strong, that the place to be is Israel. But then you see the Tosfot on the same Talmud, and he says, well, this is irrelevant today. Because where is he living? He's living in southern Germany on the French border, French-German border. And right, it's a very different circumstance there. They're going through pogroms at the time, but still he says, this is today it is not a commandment to live in the land of Israel. So how do you fit that with the fact that it's such a strong commandment and then it's not? So I think this is basically we never want to say it's okay to give up on the land of Israel. And if we had ever said that, we wouldn't have the state of Israel today. The state of Israel is not a modern invention. And that's important, I think, when you have these discussions with other people. Not only we were kicked out of the land, right? It's not only that it is our promised land, it's also that it's not something that came out as a European colonial project. This came out of the prayers of 2,000 years. We never gave up on. So in that sense, it's something that the fact that the modern world brought forward Zionism, or like nationalism in general, and then Zionism fit into that. So all of that came together to say, okay, now we can actually realize that. Lars.
Yeah, it's interesting with the Rambam's comment as well, that when I mean, almost every people in the world try to conquer as much as possible sometime in the history. But here it says that it's a transgression to conquer anything more than Israel. It's just Israel. So that's actually a kind of argument that say, okay, we have this land, but we only want this land, nothing more. But all the other, for Arab state, they want the whole world to caliphate. But it is only one land. That must be unique to be to not want to expand more. I mean, Sweden wanted to expand very much, but couldn't really. Yeah,
you mean the occupied land of Stona.
And very like the Tension.
I'm hearing some political tension.
Yeah. But I mean,
Yeah.
it's actually fascinating that it's assessed that it's limited. It's just Israel. It's Israel and it's just for Israel, not more.
I think it's for me, it always goes back to the sense of love,
Yeah.
right? So if I give someone a present, it would be very hurtful if that person said, "Oh, that's nice, but can you also get this?"
Yes.
Right? That's a beautiful dress, but can you also buy, in that sense, right? So this is the promised land. It goes back to the first source we saw on Friday. This is the promised land of Abraham for the nation, and it's a spiritual center. It's a place of love. It's something that connects us. All of that, and thank you for bringing that forward because it is. This is what it is about. I think it's also important to mention, but we definitely do not have the time now, that this notion that no Jew was in the land for 2,000 years is a lie, right? It's not true at all. So much so that there's no point in time that there was no Jew in the land. So yes, the Roman Empire, and we had all of that, but it's a very Western history, I would say, that was also taken under, integrated into Jewish history. That idea of we were kicked out. Yes, we were. We were taken as slaves to Rome. However, Jews were living there, right? When you talk about, right, what century are we talking about? The first century, they were there. Second century, Bar Kokhba revolt. Afterwards, they were expelled from Judea and they reset up their center in the Galilee. We have the Talmud Yerushalmi, called the Palestinian Talmud. We won't discuss that, right? What does it mean? Because it's called Palestine by the Romans. So it's called till today the Palestinian Talmud. I don't know of anyone in Ramallah who's learning it right now. But right. So anyway, we have the century in Tiberias, and that leads up to the right later on, and we just go through like that all of history. There's a family in the Galilee. I think that the grandmother, that the woman is still alive, that she's lived in that same home since the time of the temple, her family. Okay, which is just to I once visited her. I don't know if she's still alive. She was quite old at the time, but just keep that thought for a minute, right? You have the same family home. And the fact that you go and see all of the archaeology today still existing, what is the difference? We mentioned it at one point during Shabbat. The Roman cathedral that is there, the Romans in Rome today have no connection to that people, to that culture. But we walk into a synagogue in the Golan Heights, like it was a few weeks ago, and it's our synagogue. It's my synagogue. We pray there. We have a minyan. The Chayalim now in Gaza are praying every day in a synagogue of Gaza that was established there in the 5th century. And they're praying there. And the mosaic floor tile says in Hebrew, David. That's pre-Islamic times. So all of this is a long discussion, we can have it, a fascinating discussion, but the point is that we have a promised land that we cannot forget. On the other hand, we have a spiritual center, and going back to your point, you cannot be a Jew alone. It doesn't work. It's a family, it's a community, you have to be a part. And in that sense, the synagogue is called Mikdash Me'at. It's a small temple, right? It's not only reminding us like a museum of, I saw terrible, pictures throughout Europe of museums that have been turned into concert halls throughout Eastern Europe. Actual synagogues that have now been being used. For us, a synagogue is an active place of spirituality, right? And anything else would be spitting in the face, right, of that, which is very, very disturbing. So a synagogue we walk into, you have the presence of holiness. It's a small temple, it's called, according to our sages, which is very important to remember, because it's not just reminding us of, it's a living place. However, we have to always realize that the Torah and Am Yisrael can never properly follow the path outside of the land. And I think we see that tension in between. That brings us forward to the final point, which is the question of Zionism and how do we relate to Zionism. And it brings us forward to interesting questions about Yom Ha'atzmaut and how we relate to it. So you have, I think, we've seen the different sources here that also fit into the different ways that people will relate to Yom Ha'atzmaut. If I see Zionism as a secular nationalistic movement that is not religious in any essence, then I look and I say, well, I can live in the land and I can be loyal to it, but no more than that. And without getting into a long discussion, the Russian army, if they take me, I'll try to get out of it, right? So it's not so different. And also to add to that, without getting into this discussion, the thing, what does one do in the Holy Land? You sit and learn Torah. So if that is up there, and that will upkeep the whole people. So you have this relationship, which is a bit ambivalent, I would say, because it's not the Russian Empire, thank God, but it is secular. So if I see it as a secular state, then I don't connect spiritually and religiously to Zionism. And I will even fight those elements within it and fight to protect myself. The other way of looking at it is to say, well, this is the beginning of the redemption. And therefore, the fact that we had all the nationalism in the world, Zionism connecting to that, is a part of the promise of coming back to the land. And therefore, the state of Israel after the Shoah is a miracle, and it's something that saved us as a people. And therefore, that day itself is a day of celebration. It's a day of religious celebration. And therefore, I will say Hallel, I will say the prayer of praise on that day. And I think today you have a much bigger split than you used to on this, because the sources that I brought were from Haredi rabbis talking about the importance of Yom Ha'atzmaut. Right? Meshulam Roth, he's a Haredi rabbi. He's an ultra-Orthodox rabbi talking about Yom Ha'atzmaut as a day of celebration. There's a beautiful story of one of the Hasidic rabbis in 1949, the first day of Yom Ha'atzmaut, and they see him with they see him with a broom in his hand, sweeping the streets. So they said, "What? Why are you?" And he says, "I promised myself in the concentration camp that if God took me out and we came back to the land, right, I would sweep the streets if necessary." And he blessed with, right, and he said, the bracha shechiyanu v'kimanu v'gianu lazman hazeh, right, that like we say on the celebration of a holiday. So I think we shouldn't fall into the trap. We used that word a couple of times also of the divisions that we see on the media, because it's not so clear. Today, the Rabbanut HaRashit, the chief rabbinate, are the leaders of, right, the celebration of Yom Ha'atzmaut, to celebrate the miracle of being in the land. So how do we relate to Zionism and the communities that we belong to here? I would say in general are connecting more to the second, right, to what we call religious Zionism, that we're seeing the connection between the strong connection to the land and to our religious belief, and to the fact that we see it as something that we celebrate, and also that we can bring that spirituality and religion into the country in a way that is very much needed. But God forbid not to split the country through that, but to connect to everyone there. As Rabbi Kook, the first chief rabbi of Israel, who is the pioneer of the religious Zionist movement, right? He said everyone living on this land, like we mentioned a few times over Shabbat, is actually keeping the Torah, like the Ramban said, more than anyone else, and anyone who might be learning Torah all day. And the fact that it's reconnecting us to the mitzvot of the land, right? So look at Shavuot, like Shmuel mentioned in his sermon on Shabbat. Shavuot became the holiday of the giving of the Torah. But we forgot the whole agriculture, which connects us to Sfirat Omer from Pesach. Who reminded us of it? The secular Zionist movement began a celebration of Shavuot and putting all the kids on haystacks and taking them on the tractors, right? And bringing back the love of the land. So that's something we shouldn't forget either. And when we look at the kibbutzim on the Gaza border, who went there and risked their lives, 1947, just after the Second World War, things were very dangerous, and they said, we are going to set ourselves up, and we're going to follow the vision of Ben Gurion, coming down to the south, and going where it's most difficult to lead the pioneer movement, and these were all secular people. And in the later years, you have religious kibbutzim who have also set up in that area, who unfortunately were also attacked. But one of them actually was saved for a simple reason, that the gate was closed because no cars drive in and out on Shabbat. So the terrorists were discouraged from going in. And they were able to protect it. They were immediately honest. So you have religious kibbutzim next to secular kibbutzim, living in peace with each other, living in appreciation of each other, open-hearted, and you have that in many places. The yeshuv where I live, the community that I live, was founded as such, of religious and non-religious. One school, even more challenging, one swimming pool in the middle of the desert in the summer. So that bringing forward the challenges of, like marriage, how do we actually live together, not just live in separate houses? We have this. I just went to the sources that I agree with everything you said. We didn't get to anything. We hardly got through the first source, and I invite you all to continue the learning. And I'd like to, if anyone has a final thought or reflection from this weekend, and we have here a raised hand. Michael, you're welcome to share.
Yes, I just say that from today's text, I will say it's really, really difficult when you haven't been studying for a long time. But it gives meaning to what Hillel says in Pirkei Avot 2:4. He said, don't separate yourself from the community. And suddenly that word came into me when I was reading the text today. That's the importance of unity and keeping yourself inside the Jewish community. And I would say Israel, the Eretz Israel today is, how should I say it? That's an evidence of what people in unity could thrive to. But because I grew up in Sherbrooke and in Canada, and especially in the US, you will meet a lot of Jewish people that doesn't believe in the state of Israel today. So it's really hard for me to read that text today. I mean, it gives a lot of emotion if you could follow me. But I understand what Hillel says, that don't separate yourself from the community. And I could see that today when we are active in our community, that really that adds something to with the question about if the divine can be present in the diaspora. And I will say definitely yes.
Thank you for your reflection, which really I think brings a lot of everything we've been discussing here. But one thing which you just said, which is very important, I think, comes through all of the discussions. We can have differences of opinion about the divine presence, diaspora, and this, but at the end of the day, one thing is crucial: being together as a community. It's the strength. And we talked about it a lot over the Shabbat, the challenges that we all feel being very alone in the world today. So the strength is being in communities. And also that's the idea of this Nordic Beit Midrash, that even the small communities not be alone, that we all be connected to each other and strengthen each other. Any other reflections here in the room or in the virtual room? Yes, please.
I want to say that what we have learned this weekend is, I would say, very relevant for especially what I hear in Oslo. People are talking about questioning themselves and whether to stay in Norway or to go to Israel because of what is happening. And it's what we've learned this weekend is relevant because some of the question is it a contradiction? And I would also use the word conditional, that it depends on the time, it depends what's happening. And we've also learned that it's okay, it's good to be in Israel, but it's also good to be in the diaspora outside of Israel. And I think many Jews are in a conflict with themselves, whether to go or not to go. And also in the text, it says it's a positive commandment to make that choice to go to Israel. But I think many have the problem to know when is it right to make that positive choice. And it's interesting that it is a positive choice, because you have to make that choice. And we've also learned this weekend that it's a combination of faith and choice. It's intertwined.
I think
time and conditions.
Just to reflect on what you're saying, I think, in other words, it's a positive commandment, it's a struggle. When is the right time to go? Or as one community in Sweden, a very small community asked me, when is it too late to make that decision?
Yeah.
Right? And I said, I'm so afraid to hear that question, because the rabbis in the 1930s most of that didn't answer correctly. So, but I once heard a prime minister some years ago, who for some reason still is the prime minister of Israel, and it was after a terror attack, and he said, well, this proves that Israel is the only place for the people of Israel. And you can hear that was upsetting to me, because God forbid that the excuse or the only reason we have the land of Israel is because those that hate us and because of anti-Semitism. Because if that is the case, we may as well go to the Pale settlement of Russia or Uganda, right? Because our yearning for the land is what brought us back to the land, and we have to connect to the land through the love, through the spirituality, through the wanting, and also the difficulties of the land. If we're not connected strong enough spiritually, we won't make it there. It's not so easy, right? Especially coming from an outside culture, from a different way of thinking. Someone mentioned 6 days of work as if that's a bad thing. That's the case, right? I don't know if they keep discussing if it will change, but now with the economy in Israel, I don't know if anything is going to change. I just mentioned to someone the cost of this war every day, and then the support that Israel gives to all of the trauma there, to the terror victims, to everyone who's lost families, to lost husband, it's endless. Just to get back on our feet is a miracle, and we keep doing that every day. So, but it's not an easy situation. Like to say, oh well, it's safe here, it's safer here than it is elsewhere. Yes, it is safer. We have protection. Baruch Hashem, we protect ourselves in Israel, as the Jewish communities do around the world. It's very disturbing to see. I saw last night after Havdalah, we were just looking at the news, and there was a couple in Belgium. I don't know if you saw that they just saw that they were Israeli, and they were thrown down the escalator. And it's crazy to see what Jews are facing in the world today. They'd taken off an anti-Israel poster from the public, whatever, they had taken it off. Then they saw that they were Israeli and pushed them down the escalator, an old man. So it's very emotional to see that this is what Jews are going through. So it's not easy times, and we need community. I think that's the summary. We need community wherever we are, and we have to connect to Israel and support as much as we can, support our communities, support Israel. That togetherness is what's going to help us get through all of this. So Shmuel, you're back. Maybe final word, and we have to close. We have some people online for this special session.
Yes. So, as to say, closing words for what was an amazing, very special weekend we had here together. with the Nordic Bet Midrash here in Helsinki. And it was very special, of course, to have the voice of Torah, the voice of discussion of the Torah, which is something we don't have very often in many of our communities. People are used to hearing drashot, hearing speeches, hearing shiurim, hearing lectures. But to actually sit down together and study is something that we need more of, and it was very special to have it here together. I think on the matter of Eretz Israel, and the sources and all the texts that we have studied, I think one thing that is very, very clear is that we are living in very special moments, because the sources for so much of our history have been theoretical things. There were always individuals who made that step, who moved to Eretz Israel. And it's very important to understand that it's not something that the Jews just dug something up from the Bible and went back. It's something that was always existed. Like Moshe was talking to us about these people who would collect money for Eretz Israel in whatever it was the modern times, medieval times, all the time, always communities there. But this idea that going to Eretz Israel and the mitzvah itself being a very practical mitzvah that any Jew can actually do is in a way it's an amazing opportunity. We have to be very grateful that such a thing exists. At the same time, we have to discuss these questions, be mindful and aware of the facts, of the importance of this mitzvah, and understand that living in the diaspora, living in Chutz La'aretz, is you're missing something. You're missing something quite essential, and it doesn't always mean that my job now is to move, but it's something to be aware of. I think in general, whenever we study in the Bet Midrash, it's also very important to say this, and I'll say this to this group, because there are people from different communities. It's very important for every Jew to have a rab, to have somebody you go to, ask your questions, ask these decisions. They could be massive decisions like this decision, whether I should live in diaspora, whether I should live in Eretz Israel. They can be much smaller decisions, but very important, this guidance, because when you study the sources, it's very easy to take out one verse or one text or one comment that really, really inspired. But if you don't have the larger picture and don't have the larger understanding of everything that's going on around you, you might take that one verse and be inspired one way, and because of that, you might neglect other pastoral, other very important mitzvot. It could have, whether it's your family, whether it's any areas. This is a general point, not specifically about this subject, but I think that's very, very important. Everybody should connect to their community, connect to the rabbi of their community, and Bezrat Hashem, I hope the Bet Midrash will continue, become stronger on Zoom and face to face, and we should all see each other very soon in Yerushalayim with the whole people together in Eretz Israel.
Am Yisrael Chai, Am Yisrael Chai, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael Chai, Am Yisrael. Adavino, Adavino, Adavino Chai. Israel, Am Israel, Am Israel, 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 Am Israel, Am Israel, Am Israel, Adavino, 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 Adavino. Shavua tov to everyone. Shavua tov.